We have been together for 4 days and a half in immersion in the teachings, inspiration and presence of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother through so many different aspects, approaches, ideas, experiences. This being the closing session, I would like to highlight our responsibility in life ahead. The primary part of which is to protect and conserve all that we have received. It is very easy to step out of this room and slide immediately into an old habit of living in an old way. Very often, Mother said, when people came to see her, she would pour into them something, she would awaken something deep from within them. By the time they came down the stairs, they would lose everything and go back to their normal state. When she was working on the children in the ashram school, she says 1 year of effort of her work on them, when the parents would come to take them away during the vacations, they would go out, get sucked into those contrary, false values, and come back. She said they would lose everything. 1 year of work was wiped away, and she says, I have to start all over again. And then someone asked Mother, but then why do you keep doing it? She said, you don't know the limits of my patience. But we don't need to test her patience. It would be pointless. It is our loss when we lose what she has given us. Therefore, to protect what we have received will be our single most priority. As part of this, I would like to take as if a small digression and aside, amplifying an aspect of what needs to be protected, which is the content of the teaching, but almost as a digression and a correction to something which came up yesterday. It was not intended to be deceptive, I'm sure. The person read it out from a compilation, quoting the Mother, but the message was deceptive. Again, it may be in the compilation, the compiler of the book might have been deceived or merely ignorant, but I felt it's extremely important to highlight it here so that we do not go back with a wrong idea. And for me, this is an example of the kinds of dangers and difficulties we have to protect against in the coming years. A text was read out yesterday by one of the speakers, in which the Mother was quoted as saying that I have done 10 years of work in a few months, because she used the Japa. And she says, Sri Aurobindo gave no Japa. I have also come to realize that for this sadhana of the body, the mantra is essential. Sri Aurobindo gave none. He said that one should be able to do all the work without having the resort to external means. Had he reached the point where we are now, he would have seen that the purely psychological method is inadequate and that a japa is necessary. Because only japa has a direct action on the body. So I had to find the method all alone, to find my mantra by myself. But now that things are ready, I have done 10 years of work in a few months. That is the difficulty. It requires time. And I repeat my mantra constantly, etc. Now, this was quoted, and there was a mistake even in the translation, I don't know, perhaps in the book, where the japa was replaced by nama japa. Nama japa means repetition of the name, generally in this case intended to be the Mother's name. And the result and the impression given is, well, that's the way forward. That's the way you practice the integral yoga. Repeat the Mother's name again and again unendingly. Well, she was doing it, right? And she said, had Sri Aurobindo come to the stage we are at, he would have changed his mind. But he said not to do things by artificial means, but use the psychological method. So she's putting a correction on him. So it seems. But that's the point I'm making. It's a serious deception because it does not take into account the context in which she said this. You have to understand when Sri Aurobindo wrote, or the Mother wrote, they were very precise, very careful, knowing that there would be people who would either misunderstand or try to misrepresent. But here is a conversation the mother is having casually with Satprem, and so there you don't have that kind of precision. But if you read the whole conversation, the picture is completely different, even the very opposite of the impression created. So I want to point this out. And she begins that conversation like this, and remember this is 1959. She says, when you follow the ascending path, the work is relatively easy. And please remember this, the work is easy, relatively. I had already covered this path by the beginning of the century, by 1914, let's say, and had established a constant relationship with the Supreme. So where does this path lead to? Constant relationship with the Supreme, that which is beyond the personal and the gods and all the outward expressions of the divine, but also beyond the absolute impersonal. It's something you cannot describe. You must experience it. Now this is the ascending path. And then she says next, and this is what must be brought down into matter. Such is the descending path, the one I began with Sri Aurobindo. And there, the work is immense. Now, be very clear about the context. The ascending path, you reach the highest supreme identification with the divine, and then the descending path, which is to bring that identification all the way into matter, all the way into the physical consciousness. And this is what the Mother and Sri Aurobindo are doing, not only for themselves, but for humanity. Now, if you say, oh yes, Mother did Nama Japa, no, it was not Nama Japa first, and then when she did Japa, or she did a mantra, you are not doing this, you have not even completed the ascending path. You are not bringing a descending path. You are not practicing the descending path. You have not even reached the ascent, not even halfway, not even a quarter way. And the whole thing has a very different meaning. And again, we will see the context as we go, proceed. So, next she says, the thing can still be brought down as far as the mental and vital planes. Although Sri Aurobindo said that 1,000 lifetimes would be needed merely to bring it down to the mental plane, unless we practiced a perfect surrender. So this is again 1,000 lifetimes in the normal evolution. Here is the conscious evolution with the perfect surrender, and of course you can do it. With Sri Aurobindo, we went down below matter, right into the subconscient and into the inconscient. But after the descent comes the transformation. And when you come down to the body, when you attempt to make it take one step forward, or not even a real step, just a little step, everything starts grating. It's like stepping on an anthill. And yet the presence, the help of the Supreme Mother is there constantly. Thus you realize that for ordinary men such a task is impossible. Or else millions of lives would be needed. But in truth, unless the work is done for them and the sadhana of the body done for the entire earth consciousness, they will never achieve the physical transformation. This is the work the Mother was doing. Or else it will be so remote that it is better not even to speak of it. But if they open themselves, if they give themselves over in an integral surrender, the work can be done for them. They have only to let it be done. Now this is our sadhana. Okay? The path is difficult, and yet this body is full of goodwill. She is pointing to her own body. It is filled with the psychic in every one of its cells. It is like a child. Now, we are not comparing our body with hers. Her body has already been infused with the supramental consciousness. Each cell has been awakened to the psychic presence and united with the psychic presence. Okay? So, when you do a japa and when Mother is using japa for a particular use, it is of a completely different order. It's not the same thing. She's already brought the cells to that point where they have been psychicized, infused with the psychic, and into that now she's doing something to awaken them to the divine consciousness. And she says, the body is like a child. The other day it cried out quite spontaneously, "Oh my sweet Lord, give me the time to realize you." And this is the body consciously aspiring. That's the level of awakening brought in the body consciousness and in the cells. And then she says, and now you see the context in which she is saying this. I could have begun this work on the body 30 years ago, but I was constantly caught up in this harassing ashram life. You see the responsibilities she had and the harassment of the people. It took this illness, sometime in 1960, just before 1958-59. It took this illness to enable me truly to begin doing the sadhana of the body. It does not mean 30 years were wasted, for likely had I been able to start this work 30 years ago, it would have been premature. The consciousness of the others also had to develop. The two are linked, the individual progress and the collective progress. And one cannot advance if the other does not advance. Remember, again, the discussion we had yesterday, Mother plugs herself into the community and into the humanity, and unless they grow enough, she is not able to do the next step for them. It's not for her that she needs that. And then she writes, I've also come to realize that for this sadhana of the body, the mantra is essential. What is this sadhana of the body? She is bringing down the highest supreme consciousness into a body in which every cell has already been awakened to the psychic presence. And into that she is infusing the supramental consciousness to transform it now to divinize each cell. Now, this has absolutely no comparison to anything which any of us might say, oh yes, I'm doing the same sadhana by repeating the mantra. We have not even mentalized our body consciousness, much less psychicized it. So the context is totally different. And here she says, for this sadhana of supramentalizing a psychicized cellular consciousness, the mantra is essential. Sri Aurobindo gave none. He said that one should be able to do all the work without having the resort to external means. Now this line we must again remind ourselves. This is the approach of the integral yoga. You do not need external means. Of course you can use them to the extent they help, but more often than not, they hinder more than help. But then she says, had he reached the point where we are now, we meaning herself and her body consciousness, he would have seen that the purely psychological method is inadequate and a japa is necessary. Because only japa has a direct action on the body. So I had to find the method all alone, to find my mantra by myself. But now that things are ready, I have done 10 years of work in a few months. That is the difficulty, it requires time. Now, so you see the context of where she is using the mantra and for what. Then comes something even more fascinating. She says, and I repeat my mantra constantly. When I'm awake, even when I'm asleep. I say it when I'm getting dressed, when I eat, when I work, when I speak with others. It is there, just behind in the background, all the time, all the time. Now, what kind of a mantra is she repeating if she is repeating it while talking to people or while sleeping? So if you say, I'm doing Mother's mantra and Mother's yoga of mantra japa, you are talking with your lips or repeating in your mind. You're not doing it when you sleep, you're not doing it when you're talking to others. So what is she doing? You can't be talking to others while still doing a mantra, right? What mantra is she talking about? And you understand this when you read these last lines where she says, it is there just in the background all the time. The repetition is not of words, but of the rhythming of the consciousness of the body and the cells which are repeating this in resonance, in aspiration, and in this repetitive character, which is the character of the body consciousness. That's why in all the earlier texts, Mother and Sri Aurobindo speak of the discipline needed to persist with the body consciousness. You have to do every day. You can't just say, okay, today I feel like, tomorrow I don't. The body needs the rhythm to repeat and to get to the message. And so what she's doing is something totally different from merely moving your lips and repeating a mantra. And the rest it doesn't matter. She speaks of how japa imparts a kind of precision, etc. And remember, she's not doing nama japa. This was the quotation which was wrongly made. Nama japa, repetition of the name of the divine or the mother or Sri Aurobindo. That's not what she did. She was watching a movie with the children, which was a religious movie, and there is the chant of Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And as that chant was repeating, the rhythm of the repetition resonated in the body consciousness of her cells on which she had been working. And she found the cells responding to that repetition. So she took that phrase only, just the Om Namo Bhagavate, and used that as the repetition infused in the body consciousness because the cells were responding to it. And that's where this context comes, where she says the japa is necessary to make that change in the body. And had Sri Aurobindo come to this stage, he would have perhaps recognized this need. Now, I want to put all this into context because unfortunately, this text and just the piece of the text separated has been used by people who want to, as if, repurpose Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's words to fit a religious framework. So you come from a religious tradition where you repeat name of God. And now you say, okay, I'm switching over to Sri Aurobindo's teaching. Yes, here's the mantra. Now I'm following Sri Aurobindo. It's like you have an altar with a particular picture of God which comes from a certain tradition. Now you've swapped that picture, put another picture, and you do exactly the same thing. And you say, yes, now I'm following the integral yoga. No, you're not. If that were the case, the mother would have simply said, okay, just do the mantra. That's it. You don't need anything else. Sri Aurobindo wouldn't have written so many books. Now remember, this is 1959. It's not even the full story. Let's look at what the mother now says in 5 years later, 1964. Okay? If what they had said, this religious group, what they had said was true, then 5 years later she'll say, that's it now, forget everything else, guys, do the mantra. What does she say? Someone asks, what is the use of japa? Is it a good method to repeat words like silence and peace in order to establish silence and peace in oneself? Mother's reply. This is 5 years later, after she has said this to Supreme. A mere repetition of words cannot have much effect. There are classical or traditional japas which are intended to subdue the lower mind and establish a connection with higher forces, with deities. Again, nowhere in this you see spirituality. Subdue lower mind, connect to deities, okay. Nothing to do with integral yoga. These japas must be given by the guru, who at the same time infuses them with the power of realization. So again, she's telling you, the mere japa is pointless unless it has been infused with a power by somebody. They are useful only for those who want to do an intensive yoga and spend 5 or 6 hours a day in yogic practice. Then she concludes, japa as you describe it cannot have much effect except to create a tamasic dullness, which should not be mistaken for mental silence. That's it. She does not say, here, I've just found the right mantra, do this japa. She says, that's all it will give you, tamasic dullness in the mind. Useful only to lift the subdue the lower mind and establish connection with higher forces or with deities. This is 5 years after. So I'm again putting all this in context so that we realize the way the quotation was put is absolutely not what the mother intended, nor what Sri Aurobindo intends. Sri Aurobindo writes this in one of the letters. There is no mantra given in this yoga. It is the opening of the consciousness to the mother from within which is the true initiation, and that can only come by aspiration and rejection of restlessness in the mind and vital. Why is he talking about restlessness in the mind and vital? That's exactly what you do when you do a japa. You have a restlessness of mind, or in the heart. And then what? How does that help? And rejection of restlessness is what you need. Again, I quote another letter. We do not usually give any mantra. Those who repeat something in the meditation call on the mother. It's not a japa. You call on the mother to put yourself in relation to her. We do not usually give any mantra because you will find letters where somebody asks, please give me a mantra, and Sri Aurobindo says, okay, you can use my name or mother's name. Now this is quoted out of context to say, this is how you should do the yoga. No, it was somebody who begged for a mantra and Sri Aurobindo says, okay, you can use this. So it's not that the yoga is done by repetition of mantra or japa. And then again another letter. As a rule, the only mantra used in this sadhana is that of the mother or my name and the mother. The concentration in the heart and the concentration in the head can both be used. Each has its own result. The first opens up the psychic being and brings bhakti, love and union with the mother, her presence within the heart and the action of her force in the nature. The other, concentration in the head, opens the mind to self-realization, to the consciousness of what is above mind, to the ascent of the consciousness out of the body and the descent of the higher consciousness into the body. Nowhere he is saying, do a mantra for either of these. He's saying become quiet and concentrate in these states. Now, if you look at it logically, as long as you have a restless activity in the mind, you will never be able to quiet the mind, which is a prerequisite for the opening of the mind to the higher consciousness and its descent for its intuitivization. As long as you have a restless activity in the heart, you will never be able to quiet it, to open to the psychic influence from within, which can only come in an utter stillness of the heart and the emotions. And so all this is to highlight this simple fact: Japa is not the way of practice of the integral yoga. A mantra is different. A mantra has a power. As yesterday we invoked, using a mantra, we invoked the presence. But had you said, okay, now that I felt good, I'm going to repeat this 100 times, you're not going to get that at all. You will have all the other things which we have already discussed. So I'm making this distinction first between japa and mantra. Mantra has a power you use, that's different. Maybe you use it as a help to start a concentration, to enter into a relation, etc. But japa as a method is not at all required or helpful even, I will say, in the integral yoga. At best, its utility can be to somebody whose mind is so fickle that he is unable to hold attention and uses the words, because his consciousness is so externalized, uses the words as a way of focusing attention. But the moment you have reached that stage where you're able to hold attention, you need to drop the words and get into the experience directly, otherwise you will never go deeper beyond the words themselves. And I could give many examples of people who have wasted years and years and years simply doing a japa, gaining no result at all. And I'm giving an example of a person I actually met, and he said to me he had spent 2 years on the banks of the Ganga doing intense tapasya and he got zero result. So I said, what were you trying to gain? He said, I was trying to gain silence of mind. I said, what did you do for the method for 2 years? I repeated the japa. Now you see how ridiculous it is? You want silence of mind and you start activity of mind and whirl the activity more and more, hoping to get silence. It doesn't make sense. And naturally he got no result. But then you blame the method, or you blame the yoga, or you say that it's not possible, or you end up saying it's too difficult. But that's wrong. All of these are wrong. So again, to recall the context in which these statements of the mother were put, and in the working of the cells of the body, bringing down a very high consciousness, when the cells are already at a stage when they have been sufficiently psychicized and intuitivized. And it was not just a mechanical repetition, it was something much more deep in the consciousness of the body. Now all this was actually as an aside to highlight this, that we actually need to protect the teaching and the practice. Because, and I read another passage from Sri Aurobindo, the nature of this teaching is something so special, so unique in the world, that there is no other. And I had said this earlier in one of the discussions about Sri Aurobindo, that there is absolutely no other yoga that is affirmative, embracing life in order to transform and divinize it. There is no other. And if this is the only hope of humanity and for human evolution, then for those energies and powers that are hostile to human evolution, removing this or compromising this or destroying it is their greatest priority. And this is the reason why, in the circumstances around Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's lives, in the ashram, in Auroville, there are forces which actively work to compromise the teaching, to create chaos, to create confusion. It's a common question, and I was thankful for Matthew's observations earlier. Common question, why do you people have so much confusion in the ashram and in Auroville? There's so many other religious movements which are so wonderful, they have no problem, nicely hierarchical, everyone obeys and everything works smoothly. Because to the forces that are against evolution, they're very happy when you withdraw from life. When the best of humanity, the best minds, the most powerful people withdraw from life and preach withdrawal from life, they celebrate because now life is free, open to them to do their mischief. But when a teaching comes and an action comes that wants to transform life, it shakes their position threatens the continuation of their hegemony, and they attack. And they attack through people, through circumstances, through ideas. And anybody who's open, becomes a vehicle, a victim. There's the example of somebody that the mother appointed for the education in Aurobindo, heading it. And within a year or two, she started doing some very crazy things with the children. I mean, crazy, I wouldn't even mention what she did. It was so horrible. And when it was reported to the mother said, what can I do? She was not like this when I appointed her. The forces seize, the forces get in. And so the second aspect of what we have to protect is our own integrity. That we do not open ourselves to other forces. And what's the point of entry for them? Well, your personal desire, personal ambition, personal needs, in which you accept to compromise something small perhaps. Even the smallest compromise, where you go against the truth of your inner psychic influence. Even the smallest compromise is enough for those forces to get a foothold. And then they creep in. And they make you feel good. Oh yes, that was worth it. And next time a little more and a little more. And they pull you. And you can't help it. You don't realize it. So I read this again from Sri Aurobindo, where he's speaking about this. He was asked by Sahana, he was asked by one of the disciples, Sahanadi, when somebody abuses you, what should I do? Should I keep quiet or should I speak up? And in response, Sri Aurobindo writes, no doubt, hatred and cursing are not the proper attitude. It is true also that to look upon all things and all people with a calm and clear vision, to be uninvolved and impartial in one's judgment, is a quite proper yogic attitude. A condition of perfect samatha can be established in which one sees all as equal, friends and enemies included, and is not disturbed by what men do or by what happens. Now this is the poise inwardly, it should not be disturbed. The question is whether this is all that is demanded from us. If so, then the general attitude will be of a neutral indifference to everything. But the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, which strongly insists on a perfect and absolute samatha, goes on to say, fight, destroy the adversary, conquer. So samatha does not preclude action. Samatha is not inaction. Okay, it is the foundation on which fight, destroy the adversary, conquer. And then Sri Aurobindo continues, if there is no kind of general action wanted, no loyalty to truth as against falsehood except for one's personal sadhana, no will for the truth to conquer, then samatha of indifference will suffice. And this would be true in the ascetic path. Where literally, and I've been to some of the very beautiful ascetic communities where genuinely people are practicing and have reached a very deep and high state of consciousness. And when I was with a friend, as the senior monk was asked, what do you say about the situation in the world? And he says simply, oh, wait another 300 or 400 years, this too will pass. It's fine for that goal, because the goal is withdrawal. This is what happened in India. And this too will pass, this too will pass. And suddenly the enemy comes with a sword and puts a sword at your neck. You don't say this too will pass. You beg for your life, but you lose it. It's too late. And we have stories in Maharashtra, the Peshwas, these were local rulers. The enemies have come and now have attacked the city. Oh no, this too will pass. The world is unreal. It's an illusion. Oh, they have now taken the treasury and all the wealth is gone. Ah, but that was just an illusory wealth. It was not real. And finally the fellow comes and is about to chop his head and he says, sorry, save me, save me. It's too late. This would be valid in the ascetic. It's not for us. And here Sri Aurobindo now speaks, and these are very powerful words. He says, but here there is a work to be done, a truth to be established, against which immense forces are arranged. Immense forces. For Sri Aurobindo, he does not exaggerate. Immense forces are arranged. Invisible forces which can use visible things and persons and actions for their instruments. And this is the catch. Anything, anyone, any object, any event can be used as an instrument for their agenda, well, including us. That's why I said we have to protect ourselves from compromise. If you compromise even a little, you've opened the way, something sneaks in and starts nudging you and warping you. And before you know it, it's too late. So, if one is among the disciples, the seekers of this truth, one has to take sides for the truth. You can't say, I will be neutral. I am for the truth. It's a bias, accepted, for the truth. To stand against the forces that attack it and seek to stifle it. Arjuna wanted not to stand for either side, to refuse any action of hostility even against assailants. Sri Krishna, who insisted so much on samatha, equality, strongly rebuked his attitude and insisted equally on his fighting the adversary. Have samatha, he said, and seeing clearly the truth, fight. So if we do not have that equality, we cannot see what is true, what is right. This was one of the great problems in the recent difficulties which took place both in the ashram and in Aurobindo in the last decade or so, that people allowed themselves to be emotionally disturbed and then the clarity of vision is lost. It's only when you come back into samatha that you can see what is right, what is true, and what's the right action you're required. The moment you're agitated, do not take a decision, wait, bring yourself back to samatha, and then only from clarity act, but you must act. So, then Sri Aurobindo continues, therefore, to take sides with the truth and to refuse to concede anything to the falsehood that attacks, to be unflinchingly loyal and against the hostiles and the attackers is not inconsistent with equality. It is personal and egoistic feeling that has to be thrown away. Hatred and vital ill will have to be rejected. But loyalty and refusal to compromise with the assailants and the hostiles, or to dally with their ideas and demands and say, after all, we can compromise with what they ask from us, or to accept them as companions and our own people, these things have a great importance. You see, commonly we say, yes, but they too are mother's children. Asuras are mother's children equally, so we can compromise, find a via media. What are you compromising? You can compromise superficial appearances. Okay, shall we paint this green or red? Doesn't matter. But you do not compromise on the truth. You do not compromise on things which are essential in the teaching, in the practice, in the presence, in the influence and the will of the divine. No compromise. Take sides. Nothing wrong with that. You must take sides. And we are in the battle right now, in the thick of it. Again, the same thing happened when Sri Aurobindo was attacked, or in Aurobindo, when there is this collision now. There are people who say, I will choose to take no sides. Wrong. You cannot take sides. To not take sides is to align with the force which is attacking, isn't it? So put this in context. I'll just read a little further and you'll see how Sri Aurobindo explains this. Then he says, if the attack were a physical menace to the work and the leaders and doers of the work, one would see this at once. So, if somebody came rushing with a knife to attack Sri Aurobindo, will you say, I choose to be impartial, I will not take either side? You see how stupid it is? It means you are taking the side of the attacker and allowing him to do his mission of destroying the truth. You have to say, no, I stand for that which is the truth. And I will fight, even at the risk of my own injury or death, to that which comes to attack the truth. Very simple. So, he says, if it is a physical attack on the work or the leaders of the work or the doers of the work, one would see this at once. But because the attack is of a subtler kind, can a passive attitude be right? Just because the attack is more subtle, in fact, the results, consequences are far greater because more subtle. It is a spiritual battle, inward and outward. By neutrality and compromise or even passivity, one may allow the enemy forces to pass and crush down the truth and its children. So, not to be neutral, not to compromise, not to be passive is necessary in the battle when the truth is attacked. And then he says, if you look at this from this point, you will see that if the inner spiritual equality is right, the active loyalty and firm taking of sides is as right, and the two cannot be incompatible. So putting it in the context of Aurobindo, the people who say, I don't take sides, I say, you're wrong. You have to take sides. But which side? The mother's side. What is mother's vision for Aurobindo? I stand for that. No compromise. And if somebody goes against that, I'm sorry, they are wrong. If somebody says, oh, mother's vision is now old, we need to restate the vision and recast it according to our preference, well, very simply we tell them, no thanks, you may go elsewhere and start your own community. Aurobindo is not meant for that. Aurobindo is for manifesting the mother's vision. Or the same in the context of the Sri Aurobindo ashram, I will simply say, this is Sri Aurobindo's ashram, not your personal ashram. And if you have your own ideas of how it should be, well, you may leave and form your own ashram. But in Sri Aurobindo's ashram, you cannot abuse Sri Aurobindo, you cannot contradict his teaching or pervert his writings. Very simple. And the same would apply to our communities and to our personal lives. Very simply. Okay. So I complete this text. Okay, I think this takes care of Sri Aurobindo's comment on this. So I come back to this idea, we have to protect, and we are in the midst of a great battle. And the battle is across the world, in all fields, in all activities, in all circumstances, political, economic, governance systems, environment. But be careful not to be swayed by what the media tells you, because the media is already in the hands of the deceptive forces. And you know this by the simple fact that they don't tell you what's really happening. They cover up things, they cover up stories. Do not trust the media. The media is not your friend. Go deeper, go to the central core aspects of the issues. We took an example yesterday of how that works. It's not about communism or capitalism, it's about the principle behind, and suddenly the picture changes. And you have a psycho-spiritual solution which you can begin to put in practice very effectively. So, for the last 50 years, let's say, from the time mother withdrew her from her physical body, these forces have had a free rein. And we have been on the back foot, we have been asleep. We've allowed them free rein, and now we see the consequences of that. And therefore, it is so necessary for us to speak up and act with clarity. And where you're unclear, wait, recover your equality, find the deeper influence and guidance that comes aligned to the psychic, aligned to the intuition, and then only act. There is also this group that keeps saying, Sri Aurobindo always revised his own writings and changed his mind. So what's wrong if we improve on him, right? He didn't. This is a falsehood. He revised to improve, to raise, to make more precise and accurate, to add dimensions which were perhaps not covered. He never changed. Because when he wrote, it came from a deep insight, and as I've said so many times, he built from first principles, which are universal and therefore also eternal. And so he never needed to change his position. He added nuances or expanded on certain points, and that was it. Nor would it be say, and this is again a group that says, oh, Sri Aurobindo is old, mother is new. You see in the agenda, mother says, if Sri Aurobindo was around, he would have changed this. No. The mother never has contradicted Sri Aurobindo. She has built upon that work. They are one consciousness. They cannot contradict. And that's why I took time to clarify, I read that whole text, and explained that it was not a contradiction. And if we understand the natural logic of the teaching, we will have absolutely no problem. And for this, when you read, do not read fragments. Okay, compilations are useful, it's a good starting point, but when you want to really go deep, look at the full picture. And this is, of course, the problem with most compilations. Fortunately, most are pretty well done, except in cases like this where, whatever the reason. If we have to protect the work, we have to protect the teaching, we have to also protect ourselves, there's one more thing we have to protect. The future of which our children are the first representatives and participants. Protect the children also. Now this has two angles. One is consciously help them grow in alignment with their psychic being, with the soul, with the spiritual presence. And everything out there in life, everything in the media, everything in the cinema industry, entertainment, is contrary to the soul values. And when I say everything, it's 99%. You may occasionally find a few glimpses here and there. Certainly tap into those. But the bulk of it, overwhelmingly, is against the soul values. And this is not by chance, it is intentional. There is an attempt by these forces who have had a pretty free reign for a very long time. They've got into all these systems and they want to compromise the future and destroy it. And we have to actively protect it. They've had a head start of 50 years, let's say. But we have to begin the pushback now. I saw recently, and it was very disturbing, there was a group of people in a parade in New York City, which was very prominently promoted, but the media didn't tell you the full story. And I saw the video in that parade. These people, extremely crude and ugly in their expression and in their message, were loudly shouting and chanting, "We are," whatever it is, their identity, "and we are coming for your children." And they repeated this again and again, "and we are coming for your children." It was amazing that the media did not highlight this fact. That the agenda for them and that crudity and perversion that they were expressing at that point was aimed at seizing your children. So understand the battle has reached quite far. It has attempted so many things in the compromises it has brought, and now it's aiming straight at the children. And you will see across the world, in the media, in the entertainment industry, in cinema, this attack that's taking place on children. You must protect your children. And there are two things. One is, of course, a kind of an isolation. It was easy in those days. The mother had to censor the movie for those parts which were not appropriate. It was simple. Now it's not, because it's everywhere. Even in the advertisements which are on the streets, you can't tell your child, "Don't look at that, it's ugly." You can't say, "Don't listen, it's coming through your phones." You can't say, "Don't use the mobile phone or your tablet." It's too late, you can't do that. But you can teach them to feel the truth of the deeper influence, to become familiar with that to an extent that when they feel a contrary influence, it will feel wrong. And you must consciously familiarize them to these deeper spiritual values and consciousness and vibrations. And then this is one side, the other is actively tell them. There are things out there which feel wrong. And when you feel this conflict, trust that which is the deeper truth within you. Even to make them conscious, they will have their own desires rising, and that feels inside them, that's not it. There is a deeper it, and against which there can be desires, emotions, and compulsions of various kinds which are not aligned to it. Make that distinction, speak of it. Explain things to them. Whenever they ask you a question, "What is this? Why are you doing this?" explain to them. Don't just give a label. I was with friends a few days ago, and the child asked, "What is that?" And the parent said, "This is a blessing packet." So I said, "No, that's not enough. Okay, this is a blessing packet, that is a cat. You just have a word." So I took pains to tell the child, this is something which the mother has infused with her presence and force. When you touch it, this is what you will feel, her force, you will feel her help. Whenever there's a problem, whenever you don't know what to do, you take the blessing packet, hold it in your heart, hold it to your head, or invoke the presence, ask for the help. It will protect you. Now, you need to say all this, because nobody else is going to say it for them. The media is not going to say it. Well, there was a time when we had a few beautiful religious movies where some truths at least came through the religious teachings. That's gone. And children don't find it interesting anymore against all the very aggressive vital excitation. So you need to say it. And it means we have to start thinking differently. Unfortunately, you can't, because both parents are working. That's one of the things which has changed from what was 50 years ago. You don't have enough time. You come home, you're tired. You have to make the time. Because this is far more important. And the sooner you start, the better. Because by the time they reach 8, 9, 10, it's too late. because the pressure of circumstances is forcing them to individualize much earlier than before. In your own experience, you will say, yes, we came into individualization and even rebellion against parents in late teenage perhaps. No, they get that much earlier. And so you need to get them into the familiarity with the deeper truth and presence and experience much earlier. Start now, protect them, and as part of that protection for the children, you need to form communities. You need to come together as a group to create a collective space in which the children can freely play with each other and find friends who share the same values. Otherwise, you do all this good work here, they go into school and the peer pressure is the complete opposite, and they need to conform just to have a friend, and they need the friendship. And perhaps this center could start that in a small way to form this. There was a theme on the community building also. But this needs to be done for children especially. And then for us, we also need community. How many friends can you have out there who share the same values? And this is the special value of this gathering, that we come together as friends. Though we don't have too much interaction on a social level, which is not needed, the fact that we are together in a shared aspiration is itself a huge blessing. So, protect the community, build community, protect community based on the spiritual values. Don't let it sink into mere socializing, which also tends to happen. And I've seen this even happen in other Sri Aurobindo related gatherings. They would call it a gathering for centers. People came together and all they had was very low grade social interactions. Okay, perhaps, but not very useful. Because you could do that with anyone, it doesn't matter. It has to be based on the spiritual consciousness and experiences. And finally, if you're going to build a community, the unit of change in the community is the individual, that's you and I. We have to give ourselves time. How much time do you give for yourself for your own spiritual growth? Now, it's one thing to say, yes, all of my life I tried to make it a means. No, that's not enough. Because you make it a means in that part which is active at that time, which is generally a very superficial part. You have to become conscious of the deeper and higher ranges within you, which you can't do while you're in the middle of work. Yes, you can consecrate your actions, your most superficial parts. Excellent, very good, good foundation. Not good enough for the integral yoga though. Upon that foundation, you have to give time to go deep within, to open to the inner and higher ranges of your own consciousness, in which you can feel actively, powerfully, directly the presence and force of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, of the Divine. And you have to give it time. And that time can only be done in a state when you're reasonably fresh, not when you're tired. I come home, I'm dead tired, I'm about to crash into sleep. You can't do something useful there. So either you come home reasonably early and you have the time to do it in the evening, or you try to do it in the morning, or if neither, then you do it on weekends. And perhaps one of the aids might be, if you're living nearby here or within your own spaces, if you're away from here, form little groups. On weekends you meet, just sit together and concentrate, meditate, invoking the presence. Often it is a great help when you do it as a collective. Mother said a minimum of 5 people to form a center. 5 people meditating. And then she said something else interesting. She said, if 12 people sit together and concentrate, the Divine is immediately present. Okay, the 12 is not critical, 5 is good enough, 1 is good enough. But it's an aid when we come together as a group, because sometimes I am low, but others are not, and their presence helps me lift. Sometimes someone else is low and I'm not, and my presence helps them lift, and so on. This is the benefit of the collective concentration and gathering. So organize this. Create local circles if you can. And if possible, after a concentration, read something together of Sri Aurobindo's and the Mother's writings. It can be just a reading to feel good. It can be a discussion following the reading of how to apply it in your own lives, each one sharing what they feel. But you must organize this. And it can be brief. If you don't have much time, keep half an hour, 1 hour, whatever works for you. And if it does not work and you find it boring, people are dropping out, change the content of the interaction so that it becomes relevant. People drop out because it's not helping them. If it helped you so much, you would cut away time from other things and go for this because it's so valuable. And if that's not happening, discuss it. Say, I don't feel it useful. And try out things until it works. And maybe the group evolves. It worked for 1 year, now it's becoming boring. Change it again. But you need to discuss openly, because the goal is not to do it for the sake of doing it. The goal is to grow together. And if that's not happening, change it. Very simple principle of the yoga. If what you're doing is not leading you to conscious growth and change, which is visible, then you're doing something wrong. Change it until you get that. So the unit of individual being, the unit of the collective being individual, take that time to work on yourself. Draw upon the help of the Divine Mother. Because it's easy to lose perspective of that she's constantly there to help. One tends to slip into the old mode of I have to make effort. And the moment you find yourself strained and struggling, remind yourself there's something wrong I'm doing. That's not how the integral yoga is meant to be. It's meant to be a smooth gathering. Yes, there are bumps. But the movement of the gathering of awareness, concentration and intensification is a smooth movement. The bumps may happen in terms of relapses, difficulties, little parts which resist. But the overall movement itself has always to be from light to greater light, from joy to greater joy, from experience to deeper experience. And if that's not happening, review. 3 things you must concentrate upon. First is the awakening to your own deeper aspiration. And deeper means each time deeper. Going deeper, all the way to the source of the aspiration, which is in the psychic influence and eventually the psychic being and presence. But anywhere you come closer to it, each time it must go a little closer and a little closer and a little closer. If you have worked on this sufficiently, all the rest would become easy. But you don't have to wait for this to be complete and perfect while you work on the second movement, which is an opening above the head. We just read that passage. Aurobindo says, concentrate in the head or above head and open to the presence which is above, which is a vast cosmic presence of the Divine Mother. A cosmic peace, light, force, love. And inside is a small inward movement, so to say, to your own individuality and the deepest truth of individuality. But above is this wide opening and a vast descent that takes place of her force and her peace and light and her love. But to open widely above is the second movement. And as this grows, you will find your mind itself will become clear, calm, a deep equality, awakening, and a clarity, and a gradual intuitivization of this. Which, if you persist, and you don't need to worry about how it will happen now, will lead to the formation of what I mentioned yesterday as the mind of light, preparing the way for the higher supramental stage. But right now we don't have to worry about it. Just know that it will happen as a result of her working. The more you are able to open and give yourself, it will start necessarily in the feel, felt in the mind awareness and some part of the emotions as they can turn and rise. But eventually that will continue to deepen and settle all the way down into the physical body. You will feel as if in the tissue of the body, the glow of the presence. Again, that's nowhere near what we read of the mothers saying the cells themselves had been infused with the psychic. That's way further. But just this holding this presence in the body begins to change the body consciousness. And so these are things we have to put into practice consciously, for which you have to give time, if possible, every day, at least once a day. And if you can't, as I said, do it at least once in the weekend. This being the circumstance in which we are today, we have to make that special effort as, well, hero warriors. And so Mother gave a prayer for this, and this was 1952. And the prayer goes like this: make of us the hero warriors we aspire to become. May we fight successfully the great battle of the future that is to be born against the past that seeks to endure, so that the new things may manifest and we be ready to receive them. The past wants to endure. The future is waiting to be born or working to be born. And in between is this battle of which we are the fulcrum. What we do decides the outcome, at least for us in the immediate future. The future is inevitable. The end of the past is inevitable. But whether this happens with great pain and long duration of struggle and suffering, or whether it happens by a joyous, rapid ascent and transition, depends on us. The outcome does not, but the passage depends on us. And that's where we have to make this choice. And another message that the mother gave, which expands on this idea of the war, being a warrior, and this was again 1952, mother wrote, "To follow Sri Aurobindo in the great adventure of his integral yoga, one needed always to be a warrior. Now that he has left us physically, one needs to be a hero." But it's not difficult in that sense, because she's there with us and she forms us to be the hero warriors. Our gathering here once a year is one of those very special occasions which allows us to amplify, intensify this aspiration collectively. And over the years that I have been able to come, I've enormously benefited from these meetings equally. And I want to express my gratitude to H.P. Rama and to the whole Rama family and his extended family, which welcomes us with so much love and affection. And it's one of the reasons why I've always been happy to come. And then the rest of us, all of us, as the spiritual family that is present here, will always remain connected spiritually wherever we may be on earth, because we have shared in this aspiration and this purpose, even if we don't meet physically so frequently. And when we do, it will be always a reunion of a, familiar family member, isn't it? One of the great changes that has happened in the last 3 years is we are as comfortable meeting online as we are meeting in person. But meeting in person does have an element which is so special and makes things so different. And we should take full advantage of that. And I hope in the next 3 years, as the center is established, more and more people may be able to come and this family grow, and this to become a nucleus for the Mother's action in the United States of America and in the world. These few days have been helpful for this, and we can concentrate together in a quiet aspiration and in gratitude and in self-giving to the Divine Mother and the presence and love that she has poured upon us in this space altogether, and the hope and the promise of the future that will grow inevitably. Uniting our aspirations in a collective aspiration, we may chant Om together 3 times.